Hello and welcome once more to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay and my guest today is Jez Alborough. Hi Jez.
Hi Ian.
And I first met Jez nearly 40 years ago at an encounter group in London. So we're gone to that a little bit later, but we got back in touch with each other a few months ago. During that time, Jez has actually been a very successful author, sold many million books around the world, and he's been illustrating and writing children's books, and I have one here called Hug, and we will do at the end of the programme a piece about his career as a writer of these books. But he's here today obviously on Conscious TV for something else, because he had a very strong experience many years ago when his personality broke down, and that was a big challenge for him. So we're going to explore his life, find out how he got to that point, what it was like, very difficult at times, and then how he slowly managed to emerge and almost reinvent himself in one way. So, Jez, you were telling me earlier that when you were very young, you used to get asthma attacks, which were quite difficult because you almost couldn't breathe when you had them.
Yeah, I've never had anything like it since, thankfully. It was a really hard start because breath is life. And I don't know how old I was. I think I was 3 or 4 when it kicked in. And I remember it used to come bad attacks always around my birthdays, which is quite interesting. I was in a position where you're fighting for every breath. And really fighting, and so it's like death is around, really. It's not far away because if you can't get that breath. So something in this system was stopping me breathing normally. It's not that I couldn't do it or my body couldn't do it, but didn't have the capacity to do it. But there was something was expressing itself that didn't want to breathe in.
Yeah, and you also said, we talked about it once, that you had to be calm. It was like there was no option.
Yeah.
Somehow you needed to be quiet, otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, bear in mind, I was very young, so this is nothing to do with any technique or any trying to do anything. It just kicked in. And I found myself in a place of stillness and watching, because if I didn't, it's like anything could upset it and make it become worse, And the only thing the system knows is it wants that air, that breath inside you. So, it just happened. Yeah,
and then it just disappeared after a time. And
yeah, but it's an interesting link to what happened later in my life and what I write about in my recent books, which is about that very awareness. And it's amazing to think that, well, obviously it's instinctive, it's there. It's it was kind of almost before my personality even developed. Yes. So there is a theme of this awareness, which I call choices awareness. That was the first time maybe I experienced it.
And then
consciously, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, you feel you were quite affected because your mother, you found out later, had postnatal depression, and you feel that really impacted you, don't you?
Yes. So I didn't know about this at the time. But I found out many years later, and the story of my life kind of made a bit more sense. And I also link it with the asthma too. So I found out from, it's funny how families have secrets, and for some reason my wife became the kind of depository for family secrets. My mum would confide in her things that she never told me. And my dad sometimes did too. And so my wife learned that when I was very young, my mum was postnatally depressed for the first year. So, basically the way I see it, the way I understand it, is it's not that she didn't love me, but she couldn't love. She wasn't able to express it.
Both physically and emotionally.
Couldn't be in it. Yeah. She was in this depression. So, that's a pretty tough start, because one thing we all need is love, obviously.
Yeah.
And I link the asthma with that.
Yes, because we're going to talk later about trauma in your life, and that's kind of where originated, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. We all have trauma in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I call, that was my wound. And I think we all have our wound, and everyone's is a different shape and a different texture and a different feel. And that was mine. And it was like a seam. It created a seam running through my life. It started in my very, very, some people have it much later, I think. But for me, it was like right from the beginning. And I've heard some people say that it's impossible to heal this because it's too young. You're not even conscious when it's happening. And, I've found that's not true, that it is possible to heal it. And I think the reason it's possible to heal it is because of that very same awareness that appeared when I was talking about the asthma. Something is able to go back and re-experience what happened. It's very strange. I don't even know how it's possible because it's like I wasn't conscious. I wasn't properly, I was a conscious being, but I wasn't self-conscious. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't even know my mum was postnatally depressed. I didn't know I was deprived in any way, but I felt it, That was the experience of this being. And that wound is what shapes us, one side of us, and sends us on our journey and has a massive effect on the creation of the personality.
Yeah, because they say the building blocks of our personality are pretty much in place by the time we're 3 years old.
Yeah.
So anything that happens that's deep before then, it really impacts us. And the traumas are held in the cells of the body. So
exactly.
And we'll come on because your whole process is so fascinating in terms of the way we'll go on to that. We keep it in sequence. You had these two sides of yourself. You had the trauma that was kind of hidden away there, but you're also very creative.
Yeah.
And at school you loved to do drawing and you also loved playing football, but you were outgoing, weren't you, as a child?
Yeah, I mean this side of my life I call the character. Yes. For me, the character is like one's talents, quirks, the things that make you different to your brother who's had the same upbringing, but, I'm totally different to my brother. So my character was, so the wound led to a side that was obviously a lot of pain. And, I wasn't saying I was massively depressed in my life, but I knew what that was. I certainly experienced it, and it had an effect in that seam running through my life. And the other side was very outgoing, very confident. I loved life, I had a lot of joy. I loved playing football. If I did something, I did it fully. I remember being out in my back garden and I'd seen somewhere footballers training and they put things down and they dribble in and out. Yeah. And I was there doing that on my own, in the garden. I was like, George Best was my hero. I wanted to be like him and be as fast as him and doing the kick-ups and everything. And so I had football and I had drawing, which right from the beginning I loved and I seemed to have a talent for. So those were my two great joys. And I think, so despite that start, my character got to live itself out, and I had a lot of, I wouldn't say I had a terrible childhood, in the other side of my life at all. I had a good time, really.
Yeah, you had a strong life force, didn't you?
I think so, yeah. I was sort of, if there was a classroom, I wasn't one of the shy ones.
Yeah. And then a little bit later, I think when you were a teenager, you used to have these openings that often happened when you were cycling by the terms. Just talk about those.
Yeah, I think it first happened, I was visiting a friend who lived near the river, and we used to play ping pong. We had these fantastic ping pong games, and once again, that was something that, it was a joy, it was a great joy. It's like, how fast can you go? How well can we play? And he had the same thing. So together, collectively, we had this fantastic thing that we shared. And then I was cycling home. I'm not saying it's caused by that. I was cycling home by the river. Something happened, talking about the first time, which I'd never really experienced before as a sort of conscious adult, which was my, and I don't think this is unusual. I think a lot of people have openings, but this was how I experienced it. My spine kind of felt full of golden light. My mind became very peaceful, still, and in a kind of bliss, really. And I didn't know what the hell this was. I'd never heard of anything like it. And the odd thing is I didn't tell anyone. You know, you might think of an experience that's so strong, you would go back and tell your parents or something, but it was just between me and life. I didn't decide not to, but that's the way it happened. And these happened every now and again. I mean, not that regularly, but their impact on my life was huge because they brought a message with them. And the message was that the life that you're living and the personality is living it at school, so I was 16, and the suffering side of it that came from that start in my life and the asthma and upsets, girlfriends, whatever, was one thing. But there was something else that was nothing to do with that was before that. And it was like a sort of, it was just an amazing, that's why I call it an opening. It's an opening beyond personality. And these brought up these questions. What are they? And I guess throughout my life, I was always trying to find out what they are. What do they mean? And how'd you get them? Of course. I mean, who wouldn't? You have a blissful experience, you want to have it again.
Because when you had the openings, there was no trauma experience at all, was there?
Oh, God, no. No. The opposite. I'm not saying, you know, when the opening finished, I was in trauma all the time. Like I said, I had an okay childhood, you know. But it was still this it's like another angle, another perspective on this life. And of course, I'd cycle home. By the time I got home, I was usually gone. I remember trying to maintain it. So there's this feeling in the spine and you're cycling along and just trying to, I don't know how, I was trying to maintain it. And of course it never did stay. And that's another thing. It's like, well, you want it. How do you can't summon it up.
You can't hang on to it.
No.
Yeah.
But you can, it did start a quest in me. And I think that quest definitely stayed with me all the way through my life. And of course, when I was getting into seeking with teachers, like most of us do, that was a question that I really held and I asked, and I never really I don't feel I got a good answer from it. And I think in the end, I had to find my own answer.
Yeah, and the notes you gave me, you kind of, with the openings, resulted in you having these questions for yourself. What is personality? What is suffering?
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of us that go on the seeking path, we have these questions that start at a certain stage, and then the questions get a little bit more kind of formed in terms of practicalities and what you want to explore. But what is suffering? What is personality? They're very deep questions to have at an early age.
Yeah, I don't think I had them in that form. Maybe I didn't name it like that when I was very young. I think when I was very young and I was having them, I was just hoping they would happen again.
Yeah.
But perhaps as more suffering came into my life, they became more important because it's like, where was that place again? I need some of that.
Yes. Yeah.
What does it mean?
So, and then you found a book called I Am the Gate.
I did, yeah, which is written by, it's a collection of talks, I believe, by Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who everyone knows now as Osho, rebranding. Yeah, and you know, you go through your life and something comes in and suddenly your life takes this turn, and everyone knows that feeling. There's a feeling like you've got to go in that direction, you've got to check this out. And you had the same thing because you joined the same community, and hence we met at the encounter group.
Yeah.
This guy seemed to be so wise, and I thought, well, surely he's got the answer.
And the answer you wanted was what?
The answer to those questions were what does it mean? What is the personality? What is that space that I went to, that opening? Yeah. Where is it? And what does it mean? You know, I could have had a life where that never happened, and I would have just been identified with this personality and its suffering all the way through, and that would have been my life. And I think a lot of people, most people, that's their experience. 99%
of people live that way, yeah.
Yeah, and most people watching this probably aren't like that because they probably wouldn't be watching this. But my life, you know, something blessed happened, and I'm always grateful to it. But the journey to find those answers wasn't easy.
Yeah, and that encounter group, I can only remember little bits because it's a long time ago. It was very much about bringing your feelings, your emotions, taking risks, bringing them out in the open, and it you were allowed to say anything, really.
Yeah, I remember them as a kind of quite a release. It was new, you know. We're English, right? In our families, you don't we're not like Italians or Jewish families where everything's out in the open and wild. And for me, it was quite new to sort of say, yeah, tell me what you think, you know, come out with it. And I remember it being quite, exhilarating, scary, and very new. It was like a whole new world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you made a commitment to become a disciple, sannyasin of Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. And we just realised a few minutes ago that we probably took sannyas.
Yeah, the same
day.
Same day even.
I think it was the same day, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And
Okash and Anidas.
That's right, yeah. Mine meant space within yourself, my name. What did your name mean?
Oh, God. One who's capable of love, I think.
Yeah, very good, yeah.
It's nice, isn't it?
And in a way, the most significant thing that happened that day for you, apart from taking sannyas, was you met the woman that became your wife, Rika.
I did, yeah. Yes, I thought this was a momentous day in my life because I was taking sannyas, but it turns out to be the reason. It was momentous, but for the reason that my wife was she was a sannyasin, sitting in the audience, and we met there. So that day when I took sannyas was the day I met my wife as well, and the day you took sannyas. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And so, well, we both had an adventure. We did lots of different kinds of workshops.
Then we went like that. Oh, you mean in sannyas?
Yeah. It was a very, we've talked about this, maybe certain people watching have seen this Wild Wild Country series on Netflix, which shows all the kind of legalities and the real dramas around the sannyas movement. But unfortunately, it didn't really show what ordinary sannyasins like you and I got from it, which was
we got
immense.
into it, yeah.
Why we got into it, I got immense things out of that in terms of the meditations and the workshops. And obviously the interview's about you, not about me. It's you found out more about yourself through all that work.
I did, yeah. I think it's like I did a graphic design course, and I didn't a degree in graphic design illustration. People say, "Oh, did you learn a lot?" And you think, "Well, no, I didn't. I did, but just by being there and drawing all the time. I wasn't like I had this lesson and then this lesson and then we learnt that. In art, it's not like that." And I think I feel that about sannyas. It was the experience of being around people like you and other people who are letting go or exploring themselves that was the thing for me. You know, that we were guided by someone who had a hell of a lot of insights, and that was great. But that side of it, the organisation, I couldn't stand that side of it really.
Yeah, well, it was, as I say, for us, it was for what we got in terms of the environment and the meditations. And that all broke apart after a few years for us. And then I know from again what you told me before, you did a lot more workshops with other people, I read a lot of books, and you were still really exploring. You still had the opening sometimes, and you had the trauma. You had the two sides still running. Yeah,
it became more important. It's almost like, I suppose, as I got older and when the suffering was there, it was kind of quite bad sometimes. They became more things to hang on to, and the search became intensified because it's like I really want to find the answer of what this is.
And so you were having also your career was really taking off as a children's author, doing the illustrations and the writing as well.
So that side of me that I kind of painted for you, a bit of me as a youngster, the character side, was great because it created a career that was, because I had that kind of ability to apply myself and I had some talent, and like I said, whatever I do, I kind of tend to do it fully. I kind of throw myself into it. And after art school, I love drawing and I love writing. Picture books are an art form in which I could do both. So I ended up there, and I had this, well, hopefully I still got it, this career that's been going on for 35 years, So that was like a very positive, joyous side of my life. Yeah.
But then something started to creep in more dramatic, didn't it? In terms of you'd be giving talks and just...
Yeah. So so like I said, there's these two sides, and the side with the suffering, the seam, as I sort of call it, was going through, started to kind of, you know, for a long time, the creativity, the character, the success, the career just was leading the show. So I had a pretty good run. I had a great time, really. And this was kind of overshadowed by that. But, you know, it's like energy wants to be heard in the end. And in the end, it's not going to go away. And in the end, it started kind of poking through. And even in the end, pulling down that incredible force of that creativity. And so, yeah, you know, I did a talk. And, you know, I used to do talks to teachers and librarians, and I'd done many of them. One time I was in Manchester doing one, and I suddenly, before I went on, I just didn't know how to do it anymore. It was terrifying. That was like a pre-shock, I think. If the breakdown was the kind of earthquake, that was like a pre-shock. And then about 6, you know, I kind of brushed it aside and hoped it would never happen.
So it was like
again.
a little panic attack you were having, kind of thing.
Sort of, yeah. But I feel it was more than that, because it was like whatever I normally had that allowed me to do that job kind of just wasn't available to me. So 6 months later, I was driving down to the West Country, funnily enough, not too far from here in Reading. And that's when the breakdown, kind of the full, you know, that substrata poked through, and bang, this was stopped, absolutely stopped. Because the personality kind of fell apart fully. And unlike last time, or the previous kind of pre-shocks, I couldn't bring it back. I couldn't get back into who I was.
So when you say you couldn't get back into who you were, who's the one that was trying to get back? Isn't that the personality, another part of the personality?
Well, I would say no, it isn't, no. I would say that was like the consciousness that watched the breathing when I was a kid.
Okay, so at that point you started to find that you may not have got it completely clear, but you started to realize that the personality was something that was driving you to a large extent, and you had this success, and that was starting to break up, or that was starting to not be working so efficiently, and there was something else there that could see that was the case, but that something else still wanted to get back to normality, to being the way you were.
I definitely wanted to get back, because the place I was thrown into was hell.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to get back.
And it was hell.
Screw this spiritual stuff.
It was hell because you felt you couldn't function.
I couldn't function.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who I was. And whatever the pain was that was behind it was kind of like the lid was off it.
Yeah, so your trauma was coming out,
Yeah.
would you say that?
I had no protection. Now, normally, I think we all have the wound, and we all have ways to deal with it. And many people deal with it for their whole lives and never actually confront it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was doing that myself in some ways. So my career was fantastic, and it was creative, and it was an expression of love. But it also had the benefit of distracting me from the pain. And so suddenly all those ways I had of dealing with it were just taken away, the doors opened, and all that underneath stuff in the subconscious and that pain from my early life was exposed. And I couldn't pack it away. I couldn't distract myself. I couldn't therapize myself out of it. Nothing helped. I mean, nothing.
Yeah. So your thinking process was overloaded with the trauma and fear and anxiety.
Fear. I mean, absolute fear.
That's a terrible state to be in.
Yeah, you know, you can't sleep. The heart's like this. It's and then you think, I remember lying. You know, so we were driving out west. Like I said, we pulled over to a Reading service station.
Yeah.
Got out the car, and it hit me, and I was just lying on the floor. Rika said, get on the earth, you know, walk, it will help, you know, and tried all the tricks, you know. She's a Tai Chi teacher, so she knows all this stuff. Nothing helped. And in the end, just these tears came. I couldn't stop crying. I could not stop crying. And it was weird, there were families around and adults, and they were looking at this grown man on the ground crying.
Yeah.
And it was like, why are you crying? I don't know. Paramedics were called. They didn't know what the hell was going on. They weren't trained for this. I was taken to a doctor. He didn't know what the hell was going on. He was awful, dismissive. Thought I was wasting his time, basically. I was given a pill to tranquilize me enough to get home. I couldn't drive home, so I had to get the train home. So next day, that evening, I'm sitting at home thinking, sometimes life's going here. Life goes bang. I'm sitting at home thinking I was going down to Cornwall. Now I'm sitting here, I can't function.
Yeah.
And I'm in this pain and I don't know what it is.
Life can be so ruthless at times.
Yeah.
And
when terribly.
It hits you, it's a real challenge, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the next thing is, it's like, how do you respond to that, I guess? That's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. I think I'm just looking at the notes that you gave me beforehand, and the doctor said to you, I think it was a doctor that came to see you after that particular case, he said, particular incident, he asked you if you felt you were dying.
Yeah.
And actually, you did feel you were dying, but not in a physical way. Yeah. But you were dying up here.
I have no idea why he said that. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. But it was the only bit of sense he said, because I did feel like something was dying in me. Yeah.
And then you became a recluse almost, didn't you, for quite a time?
Yeah, about 6 or 7 years, I would say. It went on.
6 or 7 years?
Well,
Wow.
There was a period where I just couldn't go out. I couldn't handle it. You realise that the personality does a great job, this thing of meeting people, and you have a boundary and you know who you are and you know who they are. And you go to town and you can handle the noise and you can do things and navigate that world out there, the world of man. And because all that left me, I was like a baby on a motorway. I was defenseless and it was all painful. I couldn't watch TV for a long time. And then there's this question of, people say, oh, did you see your family? And the thing about breakdown is a lot of shame associated with breakdown, I kind of found out. Because, it's one thing to have a broken leg and, oh, your body's ill and we know what it is and you wait and it goes. But if the mind, as it were, breaks down, this is, as far as I'm concerned, what I found out is like the personality's worst fear. Because if the mind breaks down, that's the operating system. The personality has lost its control. And I think out there in what I call the group personality, there's a subconscious knowing of this. And so breakdowns are pretty taboo. I think they're more taboo than cancer now. So even within my family, they were not being unkind, but they just didn't know how to handle it. They were scared. They felt sorry for me, I think, but they didn't know what to do or what to say, and they were really upset. And it was hard for me because I didn't know what the hell was going on. So to be with people who were looking at me with really worried faces made me feel worse.
Yes.
I just wanted to be on my own because it's like it made it worse for me.
And you were saying like stimuli, like having the TV on was just too much. You wanted
too many thoughts.
You wanted silence, basically.
Yeah. But one thing I did, and I remember the day it started, it was a Sunday afternoon sitting on the sofa. I started writing. Now I have written a journal most of my life, and I think that's part of a kind of self-examination thing. But here it became my tool. It was like the only thing I had to hold on to. And I think what wrote was this, once again, there's a theme here, that same consciousness that watched the breathing. It's something outside this choice, this awareness, was watching what was going on. And I found that if I could go there and just document what was happening, there was some fine sense of relief because there was this tiny gap between me and this hell.
Yeah, so there was part of you that wasn't necessarily part of you, but there was something that functioned okay. When the personality was malfunctioning, something else was still functioning.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing, isn't it?
And that starts to calm things down, doesn't it, a bit, when you know there's something functioning.
Well, yeah, something was doing okay. But, I don't want to make you think like, oh, then it was all okay. This was like hanging on to a tiny bit of wood in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in a storm. But at least I had that. It wasn't big at first, but at least every time I wrote, when I wrote about, why is that sadness about, or I had a memory or something, there's just that little gap of awareness that awareness gave, which helped. It was like documenting it. And I've got them all, these journals, and it's like, I think they saves me, really, that writing. And of course, I'm a writer anyway, so it came naturally to me.
And you also, you told me at one point that there was Carl Jung talked about creative thinking.
Creative sort of disease, I think.
Creative illness.
Illness. Yeah.
And I think that's his Red book, isn't it? Which wasn't published for a time. That talks a lot about that.
Yeah.
Documents that. And so there was someone that was obviously famous, who you knew of, whose work is highly regarded, had gone through something similar to you.
That really helped me. I mean, it was just like a paragraph, but the idea that he had gone through that himself, and also that his attitude to it was, instead of, that look that I get from people like, my God, what's happened to you? You used to be so confident and creative. Well, you can't do anything now. What happened to you? Is this look of terror from people. So then from Jung was this message like, well, this could be creative. There could be something in this that is positive. That really helped me.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that, because at one point you decided that this challenge you had, the personality breaking down, was actually almost like a master to you, like a teacher to you. Yeah,
I think maybe that sprung from this Jung thing, but my relationship to it, to this thing, I saw it as a thing, this like a kind of demon almost, that was just had taken over my life, had stripped me of everything that made me feel okay, and had utter command over me. I couldn't do things. I remember trying. I I had a lot of willpower. I've always had a lot of willpower, and I think that's what helped me in my career. I'm sure you've got the same. And like I said, I couldn't drive back from that event, and months later, we had to hire someone to drive the car back. And there was this symbol of the car was like my life was in the garage, it wasn't going anywhere. So I'd try and get in the car and drive, and even that was just really hard.
It's too much.
Yeah. How do I get back? Will I lose the way back? And then one day I went to my parents' house, which is about 15 miles away, and that was a major thing. I thought, I've done it. My heart was racing. I got there and I just collapsed again. Yeah. And my dad had to drive me back. My God, this was a very special moment between me and my dad. My dad was a very, of his generation, he didn't show his emotions much. And here I was sitting in his car, just sobbing and didn't know why.
Yeah.
He'd never done therapy. He didn't have any truck with all that, really. But it was so sweet, because in the middle of that, he just said, he didn't say anything other than, there's no shame in crying. Yeah. Oh, it makes me almost tearful just thinking about it. It was such a moment of compassion. So, I thank him for that. He's gone now, but that was beautiful. It wasn't always that easy with him. I think that brought out the best in him. Yeah.
But you slowly, after a time, started to find your feet a little bit more, didn't you?
Yes.
I don't know about your feet, but...
so
that's the wrong phrase, but you started to emerge.
I did, gradually a little bit more, sort of shoot forward a few years. But then I was like this damaged being. It's like I didn't know who I was anymore, and what was my relationship to what I was before, and could I still do it? And then one night when the suffering reached a kind of incredible peak, and it was so, there were times when actually I thought I was going to die and I was going to leave the body. Not that I didn't choose it. I just felt this thing happening, and it was almost like the energy was just going to shoot up out of my head. And my wife watched this happen, and she was great. She grabbed my feet and she just said, "You're loved, and you don't need to go," and brought me back. So the suffering was bad sometimes, and I couldn't even tell you what it was. It was just like so intense. But one night when it was really bad, I had this kind of awakening in the middle of the night. And so the absolute opposite. So going back to the original openings, this was like even bigger. I don't know how it happened, but so I was suddenly thrown out of the pain. And I thought, maybe this is it, maybe this is what it was all about. It's all been leading to this. It's over, I came down in the morning and Rika said, what happened to you? You look different and the whole house is full of light, she said. I said, I don't know. I said, I went to bed and I woke up in the arms of infinity. That was the phrase that came to me.
You woke up
in the arms of infinity. Yeah, it just came to me, that phrase. I didn't even think what it meant,
Yeah.
But the next day, I started looking terrible. I felt terrible again, So this is how it went for a while.
So it was like a glimpse.
Yeah, quite a big glimpse.
Yeah.
Really big glimpse, actually. But awakenings, they don't last,
Yeah. And I think at some point you also did see a psychiatrist to see if they could.
Yeah, early on. I felt I should be practical about this. I thought, well, the people who studied mental health and breakdowns, and maybe they know more than me about this, they should do. So I thought I'd go along, and I saw somebody who was quite high up, I happened to be, and I thought, well, she's going to tell me what's going on. And she said to me, so I said, the main question, can you help me? And she said, no, I can't stop it. Yeah, she said, the only thing I can tell you is it will stop, but I don't know how or when.
Because you resisted the route of going with drugs and just damping things down.
Yeah, and the reason for that also is the awareness thing. I didn't want to avoid. Yeah, we were talking about seeing this demon, this thing, in a different way and having a different relationship to it. So when I started seeing it as a teacher, that's when things got slightly easier. Because rather than just fighting it, and so my relationship to the breakdown was, I could just about bear this, go away, when's it going to stop? And when I saw it as a teacher, I'm more kind of relaxed into it, and as much as you can, and started to kind of bow down to it.
Yeah.
I said, okay, if you're going to slay me, what are you teaching? What are you telling me? What is this? And it really helped in a way. Yeah, because even in bad times, if you relax into them, if you can, the whole dynamic changes. That's the only thing you can change. You can't stop it happening, but you can change your response to it.
You can, and I think actually what happened to you is more common, maybe not quite so dramatically, but is more common than people make out. And there's so many spiritual stories about all these wonderful things that happen and openings and visions and all kinds of things. And swept under the carpet a lot of the time is very challenging.
Yeah.
Shifts in perspective, and it can take years for the shift to kind of integrate and reorganize itself and a new kind of way of being with life to emerge. And I know you've also told me before that you did try to go, when you were feeling a bit better, you tried to go back to your old world of doing children's books and then going on promotional tours, and it didn't feel right anymore, did it?
It was like wearing someone else's clothes. It didn't sort of fit anymore. I felt I was playing a part, whereas before I was in the middle of that part, and now I was playing a role and I wasn't so fulfilled by it. Yeah, so that was strong, because then I thought, well, what the hell now? I've been through this thing, just about crawling, staggering along now, being able to function a bit. And I'm not seem to be meaning to go back fully. I haven't stopped doing it totally, but to that life as it was, doing tours and doing readings and visiting schools, that's all stopped. So I thought, well, what now? I don't really know what I'm meant to do. And once again, when I let go into that was a really big thing too, because then I guess the next thing started to open up.
But you see, again, I think you have to give yourself a lot of credit for that, because so many people, they don't want to let go of something that's kind of working, and that's their identity as that person, their way of earning money. They keep running and they're kind of a bit bored with it, but they keep running and they keep running. Yeah. And that's so sad that people do that, because like you, if they have the courage to say, well, that doesn't work anymore, let's see what wants to appear. It may not appear straight away. It may take time. It usually does take time. But then something new can emerge.
Yeah. And what emerged for me, I mean, there is a line, as I say, right back to those first openings. So the kind of fulfillment of them really was when, my personality collapsed that day. In the years afterwards, I examined it, every part of it. I wrote about it. I knew about this emotion and why I felt like that and what my mum said and what my dad said. And, you get bored with it in the end. I know this thing. I knew this thing.
Yeah.
And
but it did help you at the time, didn't it?
I think you need to understand, you need to know it before it can fall away.
Yeah.
You have to, I always say everything has to be seen. Every last little hidden, I don't think, now let's be very clear, I don't think you have to see everything in order to have an awakening or to experience, what shall I call it, awakening. You don't have to clear, there's not a kind of sequential thing. When you've cleared all that, then you will have the awakening. Absolutely not true. I had mine right in the middle. I had it all the way through my life. So I don't think those two are related at all. But in order to get to a place where that personality does fall away in what I call the shift, I found that there's a process that seems to happen where this thing which governs and lives your life no longer has any power. It kind of loses its power. You lose that identification with it. And that just sort of happened. It's almost happened in the background. I couldn't even put a day on it, or even, I wouldn't even know what year to say, but I know it happened, because it's like, I just suddenly knew, it's like I would never, ever be lost in the idea that personality that was built on that wound and that pain was me. I knew I was the one who watched and who wrote those journals. So in that sense, there's no going back. Everything's still, who knows what's going to happen. Everything keeps opening. But that was a kind of defining moment and a change that has led me to write these books.
Yeah, and you talk about it's not the death of the personality, it's the death of the identification with the personality.
Important difference. Because, you might say, well, is the personality still there, or do you still experience it? And I can say, yes, sometimes I could still experience it. I would say, basically, if it was like that, it's like that now. The power of it, or the patterns or anything. Yes. So there'll still be patterns there and memories, because this thing has been around in my life, 40, 50 years, 50 plus years, and it has a momentum, and it's like an energy, a force of energy. It's like a galaxy that is this whole thing going on. But instead of being right in the middle of it, you're over here. And when you're over here, the investment, it's the investment in personality and the belief that you are it that keeps it going. That's what it feeds on. Yeah. When that is taken away, the whole thing just starts kind of losing its power.
Yeah, it's more than that. It's also the consensus reality of the personality. It's fed not just inside, it's fed from everywhere, that you need the personality, you need this and that, and it builds it up and supports it. So,
and of course, this society, the society of the whole world, the group personality of mankind, is built around personality. It's not built around seeing beyond it. So you become an outsider.
Yes.
In one sense.
So you've written, obviously we started with one of your children's books to give a context there, but you've written 2 books that kind of the inspiration has very much come from your experiences. You've written The Story of You and The Infinite
Journey.
The Infinite Journey, and they're going to be published shortly on White Crow Books.
Yeah. So
just talk us through a little bit what's in each book. I've read them through quickly, and I know there's a degree of autobiographical experience in there, but you also include how you see reality. You say the story of you. That's a story not just of you, but
anyone reading it. The human story, the story of being a person and what happens to us. I'll tell you how the books came about. So I did, way back in when I wasn't fully out of the breakdown, I did try and write, after I'd had the awakening, about what I'd seen. And the book turned out, I was pleased with it as a bit of prose, but it wasn't very user-friendly. It was a bit dry. And so I'd given up on the idea of ever catching this in a book. And I thought, okay, well, that was worth doing for itself, but that was never going to come to anything. So about 3 years ago, I was talking with a friend about these sort of issues, and he said, oh, these discussions are quite good, we should record it. So he had an online magazine, so he said, maybe I can make some articles about them. So we went for a walk and recorded our talk, and he said, we could make something of this. One thing I realized from those discussions was that a discussion, I mean, here you're controlling this beautifully, and there's a sort of order to it. But my friend's got a kind of hell of a busy mind. So we'd be going here and he'd mention this, and then this subject would come up. And what I realized was, if I was going to do this subject, it's such a huge subject, and there's so many layers to it, that I had to be really clear and to do it in a certain order. Because if you talk about something that's really complicated down here, but you haven't described the ground rules, the ABC of it, it's going to be confusing. So that became very important to me, that if you're writing a story, writing stories is all about releasing information. You imagine if you watch a detective story, and if you release a bit of information at the wrong time, the whole thing doesn't work. And a good storyteller knows about releasing information. And because I've been writing stories all my life, I've kind of applied that to these books. And I thought, okay, what do we need to know first? Where does it begin? What's the overview? How do we build it? So I wanted to control very carefully those steps, and that's what I've done in these books. It became quite long, and then it became 2 books because it was so long. So 2 entities kind of emerged. And they do tell the story of the human story. We talk about oneness and love, and then how we become a being, and childhood. So there's psychology, there's sociology in it, because we all experience this. What's it like to join a family? What effect does that family have on you, in shaping your personality? Talk about the wound, the self. So I go through all these things, and I get to this platform where I can then describe what my take on what the personality is. The emotion, what emotions are, the need to distract from our pain, where it comes from. There's all these elements that build into our personality, which we then walk around thinking, oh, that's who I am. But the minus of that is that the personality is where the suffering comes in. So if you're at all interested in going beyond suffering and not just taking drugs to avoid it or other means to avoid it, there's a confrontation that needs to happen into what is this thing and where does the suffering come from? So these are the sort of things I deal with chronologically throughout a life. That was my different take on it.
Yeah, so there was a story of you, then the infinite journey, which is, well, all our journeys are infinite, which goes into a little bit more. Yeah, tell us more about that.
In that I talk more about openings and what does it mean, to have what I call the shift beyond identification. What does that actually mean in a life that is lived? Because there are many myths, I think, about what that means, about some ideas of perfection or you're way beyond emotion or anything else. And so I put those right in the way I see it, because it's not, I think there are a hell of a lot of misconceptions about this, and also about how this is taught, and how does abuse happen in cults? How does that, everything. This is a subject I felt I couldn't miss, because it's all coming out of personality.
Yes.
Because how do you have these teachers who know so much, who have reached this apparent level of wisdom, and yet around them, well, we mentioned Osho, there's hundreds of them. Around them, I remember when I went to Oregon, and suddenly there's people walking around carrying guns. What's that about? I thought this was a place of love, And now, almost every day there's another story of some Buddhist teacher who's been caught abusing. What's that about? How does that fit into all this? So I write about all that because what I've found gave me a very clear angle on why that happens.
Yeah. Well, the great thing is the core of the books came out of your personal experiences.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's all theory for the sake of it.
No.
It's something that's built on solid ground in one way.
Yeah. I think, like I said, in the first book that I tried to write, it was too dry. And I realized people like to hear personal stories because they're humans and I'm a human and I've had ups and downs, and it makes it more relatable. And the other thing is, the books are in the form of this discussion between me and my friend Matthew. So there's also his real life responses to what I'm saying, and his stories come into it. So it's a way of opening it up and making it hopefully more accessible, because this is very human. This is not, I'm just a regular guy. This has just happened because I had those openings and I followed them. I'm not some special guy in any way, And people do sometimes present themselves when they've had these sort of experiences as special, which to me looks ludicrous.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna stop there, but we're gonna do a little bit of a part two, very short part two, just talking more about your children's books, which I think it's very interesting where the ideas come from and how that career's worked for you. So thank you for watching Conscious TV. Thank you very much to Jez. We'll put more information about his 2 new books that are coming out shortly after these credits. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Hello, welcome to Conscious TV. I'm sitting here with Jez Alborough. Hi, Jez.
Hi, Ian.
We've just done a longer interview about his life, and I wanted to do a shorter piece about the creativity he puts into his children's books, because he's actually sold over 8 million books, which is a lot of books to sell. He's an illustrator and an author, and we're just going to find out the origins of Jez's talent and what makes him tick in terms of doing the books, where the ideas come from, etc. So Jez, when you were a youngster, you had the 2 passions of football and writing and illustrating pictures. Yeah. And I know one thing you told me was at school what you loved was the books, and I remember them, the exercise books you used to have. One page was blank and one page had lines on. So that really inspired you, didn't it?
Yeah, I felt very at home there. It was like a representation of 2 sides of me, writing and drawing, because I drew all the time, and then I could write stories about what I drew. And I think there was a sense of like, oh, this is a formalized, it's not just on a sheet, here's a book. It was like a little foretaste of what I'd be doing for 35 years later on, of course, because that was primary school.
Yeah. And so you kind of, drawing was one of your natural talents, wasn't it?
I loved it. Yeah.
And
it's really odd because I don't do it much now.
Well, we're talking
That's
about
another thing,
career then. So, and you, I think, again, from what you told me, you would draw, you would see a picture of a celebrity and then you draw your own caricature of the celebrity.
Yeah, I was fascinated with how, I tried to catch a likeness. And I studied people who could do that. it was interesting. It's like a linear version of someone doing an impression in a way. So I studied people who were good at that, like H.M. Bateman, and there's a beauty in line. And I used to read comics, and of course comics have the frame and the text underneath. And then I moved on to like Rupert the Bear books, and I don't know whether you remember, if you ever read them, but they had frames like a comic, and they also had a bit of the text written in rhyme underneath, which I always loved. And I loved A.A. Milne and his writing, and Winnie the Pooh. And at some point in my life, the 2 came together, and I wrote rhymes that went with drawings.
Yes.
And that became my first book.
Yeah, because it's a real art, isn't it? To especially the old comics, to tell a story, because you've got the visuals and you've got kind of some narrative underneath, but you can get caught up in a real story, what's going to happen next, just like watching a movie. Yeah,
and the interesting thing is in it as an art form is, what do you say in the pictures? What do you say in the words? You don't want to trample on each other's feet. They're both doing a job, and which one is the best tool to say what you want to say at any point. So it's a fascinating art form. I love it. It's a bit like the equivalent of in music of like lyrics and music, you know. Put them, you know, a poem is one thing. Lyrics are very different to poems. They work in conjunction with the music, not necessarily without the music. Put them together, magic can happen. The interchange between that lyric with that change of chord can do wondrous things. That's the sort of stuff I love.
And I know originally you tried to get a job as an editorial illustrator, but that was tough, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really hard to get jobs.
Commissions.
Really hard. And I was just out of art college. But it was when I realised that I had a slight head start on some people because I didn't just draw, because I wrote as well. And then I kind of tiptoed into this area of children's books. I had this character with this bear, and I showed it to a publisher, and he could see that I had something, and that's how I got my first book.
But you got the inspiration lying in the bath, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Two lines came to you.
Yeah, to keep warm in the Arctic air, a polar bear wears polar wear. So those lines jumped into my head.
And this is the first book,
They became that book. Yeah.
Which is, and there's the illustrations for the first those lines. So it's
Very
lying
strange.
in the bath.
Yeah, I don't know why they came. I knew it was important. I literally thought, I can't afford to get up in half an hour, 20 minutes and forget this. So I literally got out of the bath dripping and wrote those two lines down.
Yeah.
And that's where it all began. I've done about 47 books now, I think.
And was it hard, this publisher, Ernest Ben, was it hard to get a deal to start with?
Well, it was hard when I was trying to do the editorial stuff, but when I got this wasn't. Because this is how it works, isn't it? You need someone to get what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's what you always need, that. You know, and there was someone who saw I had something, some quirkiness, some comedy in what I do. And thankfully to him, this guy called David Langridge, he started me off.
And had you
Put
written
his trust in me.
Had you written the whole book that you showed
No.
him? You just gave him the core of the idea.
I had a page of drawings and a few scribbles, and I had that opening line, I think, but I didn't know the rest of it. And, you know, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know about colouring in a book and how many pages you get or how long it should be, but somehow it came together. I look at it now, it's a very strange book. I developed through the years, definitely.
Yeah, but isn't it a great example of kind of having the courage just to follow something? So you had an idea, it wasn't completely formed, but you're willing to pick up the phone and knock on the door of the publishers and say, I've got this idea, here's a sheet of drawings and some narrative, and then it leads to something.
Yeah, well, I was trying to start a career. You know, I'd finished my training, I'd been to art school, and I needed to do something. And I wanted to do something with the talents I had. So that's all I had. You knock on doors and you try, yeah.
And you kept going, and then the first one that was really successful was Where's My Teddy?
Yes.
Great title, which I have here somewhere. Where's My Teddy?
25-year anniversary copy.
Yeah.
So not all books last that long. You know, you write these stories and some of them die and don't last very long. But this was my first big selling book. Before that, I was being published, so I was successful to an extent, but they weren't selling much. So this was a massive change for me, 92 that was.
Yeah. And there's one here that I had, this one, Hug, it sells here, it says here, over 1 million copies sold worldwide. And there's only really one word in the book, isn't there, Hug? But lots of great illustrations.
Yeah, I was talking about the interchange between words and pictures. This is a book where I took it to the extreme.
Yeah.
Because I thought, can I write a book with just one word? There's maybe two others, I think, in there, whereby the picture, the word hug is used in a different way in every different scenario. So it's about a chimpanzee searching for his mother and a hug. And what I try to do in my books is find big themes, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to capture something that we can all relate to, adults, the parents and the children. So that's somehow I managed to do with that one. And that's my biggest selling book by far.
Yeah. So what do you feel is the secret of what captures people? So why do kids love, because presumably it's the kids, the parents pay the money, but the kids have to say, isn't it a great book? The word gets around. So what is it that draws people to Where's My Teddy and Hug? Now, Where's My Teddy's got a happy ending. That helps to some extent.
Yeah, scary though. Some people were put off it because they thought it was too scary. But
Okay.
it explores fear.
Yes.
But yeah. What is it that brings them to it? You know, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I don't really know. I could try some answers. I mean, it's storytelling that's well executed, I would say. And like I said, it's that ability to take something that's big and complex and boil it down to a very, very simple idea. Here's a boy and he's lost his teddy. This is what Where's My Teddy is based on. He's walking through the scary woods to find it. He hears this sound. Great big bear comes. And the bear's, first of all, he sees, I haven't read it for a while, he sees a great big teddy bear, and then he hears a bear whimpering. And then the bear's holding his teddy, which is tiny, and he thinks, what happened to you? Why did you get so small? So obviously it's an exchange. You know, the bear has found the little teddy, and Eddie has found the bear's big teddy. So it's all based on that, but it becomes a very human thing. It's like we all need our comfort, and the bear needs his comfort. So instead of the child being scared of the bear, you realise, oh, he needs his teddy bear too. So it's relatability, I would say, by the children and the adults.
Yeah. Do you get the whole story first and then do the illustrations, or do things emerge?
They kind of emerge. It can happen in different ways. There's another book you got there called Duck in the Truck.
Yeah,
that started with that rhyme, Duck in the Truck. Yeah. So I love playing with words and rhymes. So I was just playing with the words that rhyme with duck.
Yeah, great illustrations in this one.
Duck, truck, stuck, muck. You hear that? I hear that. I hear a story.
Yeah.
A duck stuck in the muck in his truck, you know.
Yeah.
So that was, that's how that one came about.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of drama in this book.
I think also, like, I invested a lot of, I try to anyway. It's all about feeling, and if you can make the characters, you know, they're animals who talk, but they're representing real things. You know, a sheep who's scared, or a duck who's waddling across mud trying not to fall. There's comedy in it. So you're trying to make characters that you can relate to, that the child can relate to.
Yes.
And also, there's a lot of love in it. I mean, not to sound pretentious, but if you write for children, you're writing for beings who are still, as I see it, in a state of grace, of innocence and love, basically, young children anyway. So if you write for them, you've got to tune into that play. You've got to know what it's like. And I remember I had to sort of feel myself as I was at that age, with that openness and innocence, but then kind of maybe combine that with the adult one that knows about storytelling and humour and all of that. So I think it was a mix of those two things.
Okay, thank you. And you've pretty much stopped your world of children's books, but you left a great legacy here, and now you're...
I have to say I haven't fully stopped. I'm hoping I'm going to go back to it and use some of the things I'm writing in these adult books to bring them to children a bit.
Yeah, you've done the 2 adult books and you're doing some music as well, I know.
Yeah.
So your creativity is still emerging in different ways, which is great. Yeah. Okay, Jez, thanks very much.
Thank you, Ian.
And I might kind of read Where's My Teddy tonight. I think
bedtime reading.
Like happy ending, that's what I need at night.
You'll sleep well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for watching.